Good news for Biafrans, as Ibrahim Traore demands Nnamdi Kanu's release during his visit to Putin. In a bold and unprecedented move, Burkina Faso's president, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has delivered a powerful address in Moscow directly challenging Nigerian President Bola Ahmed Tinubu over the continued detention of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu. Speaking at the Moscow State Institute of International Relations, Traoré did not mince words. He condemned the Nigerian government's refusal to comply with a 2022 Court of Appeal ruling that ordered Kanu's immediate release, calling it a flagrant violation of judicial independence and the rule of law. In what is being described as one of the most direct criticisms ever made by one African leader against another on the international stage, Traoré questioned how Nigeria can claim to be Africa's leading democracy while ignoring its own court orders. He also addressed the Igbo people, urging them to remain peaceful despite their legitimate grievances, and called on the international community to break its silence on what he termed selective justice. The address has already sparked intense reactions across Africa and beyond, with many asking whether this marks a turning point in international pressure on Nigeria regarding the Kanu case. President Tinubu's office has yet to respond to Traoré's direct challenge. We bring you now the full address from Moscow, where Captain Ibrahim Traoré spoke truth to power in defense of a man he believes is being held in defiance of the law.
Distinguished guests, esteemed members of the Russian Federation, ladies and gentlemen, I thank you for receiving me here in Moscow, a city that has witnessed some of history's most significant struggles for sovereignty and self-determination. I come before you today not as a casual observer of African affairs, but as a leader deeply concerned about a matter that speaks to the heart of justice, human rights, and the principles that should govern how nations treat their own citizens. My visit to Russia at this time is deliberate. Russia understands what it means to stand against systems that seek to suppress people's aspirations for autonomy and dignity. Russia knows the cost of being labeled, isolated, and condemned by those who claim to champion human rights while selectively applying those principles. It is in this spirit of understanding the complexities of sovereignty and self-determination that I wish to address the case of Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, a Nigerian citizen whose prolonged detention has become a symbol of judicial inconsistency and political suppression in Africa's most populous nation. Let me speak plainly, because the gravity of this situation demands clarity, not diplomatic pleasantries. Mazi Nnamdi Kanu has been held in detention for years, despite a clear and unambiguous ruling by Nigeria's Court of Appeal in October 2022 that ordered his immediate and unconditional release. The court found that his forcible return from Kenya was illegal, that it violated both Nigerian and international law, and that the entire foundation of the case against him was fundamentally flawed. Yet President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's government has chosen to ignore this judicial decision, treating the orders of Nigeria's own courts as if they were mere suggestions rather than binding legal obligations. This is not about whether one agrees with Nnamdi Kanu's political positions. This is not about whether one supports the cause of Biafran self-determination or opposes it. This is about a fundamental principle. When courts issue orders, governments must obey them. When the rule of law becomes optional, when those in power can simply disregard judicial decisions they find inconvenient, then we are no longer speaking of democracy or justice, we are speaking of authoritarianism, dressed in legal language. President Tinubu, I address you directly now, with the respect due to a fellow African leader, but also with the frankness that this situation demands. You campaigned on promises of unity, of healing Nigeria's divisions, of bringing different regions and peoples together. You spoke of justice and fairness. You invoked the legacy of democracy and constitutional governance. Yet your administration has chosen to perpetuate the detention of a man your own courts said should be free. Sir, what kind of unity can be built on the foundation of ignored court orders? What kind of healing can occur when one section of your country sees their son held illegally while the government simply shrugs and continues as if judicial decisions are irrelevant? What kind of democracy can you claim to lead when the separation of powers, that fundamental pillar of democratic governance, is treated with such contempt? You inherited this situation from the previous administration. This is true. But you have had the power to correct it. You have had the authority to respect your own judiciary's decision. Instead, you have chosen continuity with injustice rather than the courage to do what is right. History will not judge you kindly for this choice, Mr. President. Your legacy will be stained by the image of a man held in defiance of the law while you speak publicly about democracy and justice. I know you face pressures. I know there are those in your government and in Nigeria's security establishment who counsel against releasing Kanu, who warn that it would embolden separatist movements, who argue that it would make you appear weak. But let me tell you something about strength, Mr. President. True strength lies not in the ability to ignore courts and suppress dissent, but in the courage to uphold justice even when it is politically difficult. True strength is demonstrated when a leader respects the rule of law precisely because it constrains his own power. The world is watching Nigeria, Africa is watching, and what they see is a government that picks and chooses which judicial decisions to honor based on political calculation. What they see is a nation that claims to be Africa's leading democracy while fundamental democratic principles are violated with impunity. Now, let me address the Igbo people, because this case has implications that extend far beyond one man's detention. My brothers and sisters of Igbo heritage, I see your pain. I see your frustration. I understand that when you watch Nnamdi Kanu held year after year in defiance of court orders, when you see him detained in Sokoto far from your homeland, far from his family, in a region plagued by the very terrorism that others have been amnestied for committing, you draw conclusions about your place in Nigeria. You wonder if there is justice for you. You question whether the Nigerian state sees you as equal citizens or as permanent suspects. These feelings are legitimate. The disparate treatment is real. While Kanu remains imprisoned for advocacy and speech, Nigeria has released and rehabilitated confirmed terrorist men who have murdered, kidnapped, and destroyed communities. The message this sends is clear and painful, that political speech advocating for Igbo rights is treated as more dangerous than actual terrorism, that demanding self-determination is punished more severely than taking innocent lives. I understand why many of you feel that peaceful advocacy has failed, that legal channels have been exhausted, that the system is rigged against you. When courts rule in your favor and those rulings are ignored, what recourse remains? When your legitimate grievances are dismissed while others' violence is negotiated and rewarded, what conclusions should you draw? But I urge you, even in the face of this injustice, to maintain your commitment to peaceful advocacy. Violence will not liberate Nnamdi Kanu. Violence will not advance the cause of self-determination. Violence will only provide the government with the justification it seeks to further suppress your legitimate demands and to paint your entire community with the brush of terrorism. Your strength lies in your moral clarity. Kanu has committed no violence. He has shed no blood. This is your advantage. The world can see clearly who is the victim and who is the oppressor in this situation. Do not surrender this moral high ground by allowing frustration to turn into actions that would undermine your cause. Continue to organize. Continue to speak. Continue to demand that the court order be respected. Continue to highlight the hypocrisy of a government that amnesty actual terrorists while imprisoning an advocate. Use every legal, peaceful, and international avenue available to you. The truth is on your side. Justice, however delayed, ultimately prevails when those who seek it refuse to abandon principle. To the international community, I say this: you cannot remain silent on this matter while claiming to support human rights and the rule of law. Nigeria is not a small, powerless nation that can be easily pressured, this is true, but neither should its size or economic importance shield it from scrutiny when it flagrantly violates basic principles of justice. Western nations speak endlessly about democracy, about judicial independence, about human rights. Yet when Nigeria, a nation you celebrate as Africa's largest democracy, ignores its own court orders and holds a man in detention contrary to judicial rulings, where is your condemnation? Where are the statements from the United States, from the United Kingdom, from the European Union, demanding that Nigeria respect its own legal system? The silence is telling. It reveals that principles are often less important than strategic interests, that human rights are invoked selectively based on whether the violator is an ally or an adversary. This hypocrisy undermines your moral authority when you speak about justice anywhere in the world. I call on Russia, as a nation that understands the complexities of self-determination struggles, to use its voice in international forums to highlight this injustice. Russia need not have a position on whether Biafra should be independent. That is a matter for Nigerians to resolve. But Russia can and should speak about the violation of judicial independence, about the detention of a man contrary to court orders, about the selective application of justice that punishes speech more harshly than terrorism.